Hi everyone, it's Rob Watson, the module leader for TECH3501, the Community Media Leadership. I haven't put the title on the page, so I didn't know. I had to think for a second then. This is a video overview of the topics that we'll cover in the 9th lecture, if I can get my words out today. And it's the idea, we're talking about intercultural communication still, and it's the idea of kind of the kind of nature of conflicts that might arise, or differences of opinion, or differences of misunderstanding of communication style. And it's the idea, where do these come from? How do we last week we thought about the idea of what is culture, and how do we recognise and understand kind of cultures that we don't share, that aren't our own, that we don't know what the reference points are. And this is where the potential is for misunderstanding, for conflict, for anxiety about kind of how we get ourselves understood, and how we feel comfortable within our own culture, but if we move to a different culture, we feel like a fish out of water. And how do we overcome that, I suppose. I'm going to use some examples from some TV clips that I found, so hopefully this will kind of be not so heavy, but hopefully some entertainment in here, and it kind of illustrates the points. And there's a great TV series on the BBC iPlayer at the moment, which is Ronnie Chang, International Student, which kind of like illustrates some of these points really effectively. And I've posted up some links onto the DMU Commons wiki for that. So we're thinking about the idea kind of, I suppose really, if social conflicts arise, then there's a process for making sense, social sense making. And it either works or it doesn't. It's either functional or it's dysfunctional, or we're either competent or incompetent at using it and working with it. So what are the kind of dispositions that we need? What are the kind of stances that we need to take to think about effective intercultural communication, so that we avoid conflict, and that we avoid losing face, or other people losing face, so that we don't build up a sense of trust and understanding. So it's kind of, we look at some issues in terms of cultural expression, cultural appropriation, kind of where cultural reproduction comes from, how kind of societies and cultures have a model of sustainability and development where they move forward in a particular way, but what drives that? And from a European Western perspective, my assumptions about what drives forward British and UK society are very different from the expectations that people have about what drives forward other forms of different models of culture and society. So we need to look at, if you like, what the reasons for conflict might be, and we need to look at the value orientations, the differences that people have about values, and what those cultural differences might be. And they're kind of quite, abstract, I suppose, but we can look at this in the context of thinking, kind of, is a culture or a community open to change? Do they have a sense of going beyond themselves, so a self-transcendence, or is it all about themselves? Is it kind of a selfish culture? Are they radical and progressive, or is it conservative and hold on to the traditions of the past? At what point do you enact and enable, who's self-motivated? Americans are individualistic and go-getters, whereas maybe other cultures are more about reaching agreement and consensus and following tradition before you make changes in societies. So there's a kind of, we can look at these differences in terms of those which are short-term and those which are long-term, those which are kind of more individualistic or more collective, and those things which are kind of related to the power, the role of power, and those who are powerful within society, and the deference that you show towards those kind of leaders just because they are an elder, if you like. So there's a way of, there's some surveys that have been done that kind of look at this and look at how different societies and different nations particularly are recognised as being all different in these ways, and that when we undertake our intercultural explorations and we're out there discovering different forms of society, and how can we navigate that? So one of the important factors is kind of negotiating face. Do you want to, it's maybe not so readily apparent in the West, the kind of shame and the kind of social pressure. It is there, it's there within all societies, I think, but the volume in some other society, Indian society particularly, I've got an example to play a video which kind of talks about, you don't want to hurt other people's feelings, so it's better to not tell them the outright truth. Whereas I think in the West, it's actually you do somebody a disservice if you don't worry about their feelings. They can catch up later on. That's not so important, but give them the information. That's more important. So these kind of cultural differences can really make a huge impact on the way that we establish intercultural groups and intercultural communication and relationships. And how do we manage conflict is a really important question, because if we all approach conflict in different ways, and there will always be differences of opinion, differences of understanding, differences of expectation, different values, but we don't have the same way of resolving conflicts. Often our conflicts are managed in very different ways, and what would be a useful way to kind of resolve difficulties and problems and come to an understanding. And this is where I think community media can play a very powerful role in terms of bringing about conflict resolution. And there are lots of examples of where community media has been used as part of a conflict resolution process, because it's about people expressing and extending their thought process and sharing their subject positions of who they are and what they have experienced with other people using, community radio, for example, or community newspapers, for example. So I'm kind of going to intersperse this with some videos, and hopefully it won't be too difficult. But we'll come out with some principles of how to be an effective intercultural communicator. Right. Okay, that's the last point for this lecture. The notes are up on the DMU Commons wiki, and that's at wiki.our.dmu.ac.uk. Just search for the TECH3501 section on there, and I'll see you at the lecture on Tuesday.